My husband cheated on me with his ex at work, but when I got pregnant, he wanted an abortion. My ex-husband Mark might be the most entitled man I know. Divorcing him was probably one of the best decisions I have ever made, and I thought I could live in peace for the rest of my life. But here he is again. 9 years ago, I was happily married to Mark. Our relationship seemed unshakable, or so I thought. We had a solid bond, we dated for 3 years, got engaged for a year while planning our wedding, and then got married. At that time, I was ready to fight for our marriage to the end, believing we were soulmates. But evidently, I was wrong. A few months after our wedding, Mark lost his job. It was a challenging time for both of us, but I was confident that we could get through it and he would find new employment. We had some savings in the bank, and I was working full-time. It was tough for a few months, but he was doing his best to find work. Finally, after many interviews, he landed a new position. I still remember how happy we were the day he got the job offer. We went out to celebrate. Little did I know that this job would end up destroying our marriage. Mark returned from his first day at work looking terrible. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw him. A difficult conversation ensued. As it turned out, his ex-girlfriend Sarah worked at the same place he had just joined. I knew about Sarah Mark, and she had dated for 3 years. He had proposed to her, but she turned him down and left him. This happened a few years before Mark and I met and began dating. We didn't often talk about our exes, but I knew it was a tough time for him, and after that one conversation with me, he never mentioned her again. When I heard it was Sarah, my heart sank. Of all people, it had to be her. I didn't know what to do. Yes, it had been many years, and Mark assured me he had no feelings for her anymore, but the idea of them working together was not comforting. He seemed very upset too, and we spent a lot of time discussing what we could do. He offered to quit the job, but at that point, our savings were dwindling, and I didn't know how long I could manage all the bills without making significant lifestyle changes that neither of us would be comfortable with. Besides, I told myself that we were adults, and quitting a job over an ex seemed childish. We talked almost all night about what to do. By the end of the conversation, I felt much better about the whole situation. It seemed silly to think that some ex from years ago could affect our relationship. Mark was very loving and kind and put all my doubts to rest. The next day he went to work, and when he came back, he said she was in a completely different department and he hardly saw her. He told me he had no intention of talking to her unless absolutely necessary for work, and would let me know immediately if that happened. This reassured me, and as days went by, I stopped thinking about her entirely. Mark was as loving as ever, and I was proud of us for overcoming something that could have been a serious issue if not handled well. Looking back, I laugh at how naive I was. I was so blinded by love and trust in my husband that I never suspected anything might be wrong. A few months into his new job, he went on a business trip. He told me that if it went well, he might get a promotion, so I was very excited for him. I asked if I could join him and make it a mini getaway for us, but he said he would be working the entire time, so there wasn't much point. He also mentioned that the team going for the meeting consisted only of men, and none were bringing their spouses or partners, so I might not be comfortable. I felt a bit disappointed but didn't think much of it since what he said made sense. When he returned, I asked about his meetings and if he thought he would get the promotion. He replied that he might need to attend a few more meetings with this contractor before the promotion could be possible. Over the next 3 months, he went on trips at least once a month, but there was no news of a promotion. Instead of getting suspicious, I was naive enough to be concerned about his company making him work so hard without a raise. I also want to clarify that after our initial discussion, neither of us mentioned Jessica again. She didn't cross my mind much, and even if she did, I chose not to bring it up. When I shared this with my friends during the divorce, they all said it was incredibly naive of me to blindly trust my husband so much. I agree with them now, but back then, I would have trusted that man with my life. 5 months into his new job, I realized I had missed my period. Not thinking much of it, I decided to take a pregnancy test just to ease my mind. To my surprise, it was positive. I was taken aback as it was definitely not a planned pregnancy, but with Alex's new job and both of us being financially stable, I thought it could be a good thing. I was nervous but also very excited to tell him, Alex was on another business trip when I took the test, but he was coming back that same day, so I decided to wait until he got home. I still remember how nervous I was and how I started daydreaming about our new life. It was quite late when he got home, and I stayed up to have dinner together. He came in looking upset, so I asked what happened, and he said it was just work stuff and didn't want to talk about it. I told him I might have something to cheer him up and asked him to wait while I got the test kit. I told him to close his eyes, held it up, and asked him to open his eyes. He stared at me for a few seconds and asked if it was what he thought it was. I thought he was just in shock and said yes, we were about to be parents. Excitedly, I waited for him to snap out of it and be happy, but after a few moments, he still had that look on his face. I got uncomfortable and asked if he was okay and if he wasn't happy about this. His expression changed, and he said he was just taken aback by the surprise. I told him I was surprised too, but this could be a very good thing for us and we could deal with it together. He still looked uneasy and said he needed some time to think. I was extremely upset by this reaction. I expected him to be happy or at least supportive. I told him I was disappointed in him and he basically brushed me off, saying I couldn't expect him to be overjoyed about such a monumental change happening without his decision. I told him he signed up for this by marrying me, and if he couldn't be a good husband about it, maybe we needed to rethink our relationship. He said maybe we do, and left the room without another word. I said that in a moment of anger and hurt I didn't really mean it at the time, but his reaction broke my heart. I cried by myself in the living room and slept there. I slept on the couch because I didn't want to see him in our bedroom. He didn't come once to check on me or ask me to come back. Even then, I had faith that we would get through this and somehow recover. But that was just the beginning of my troubles. I woke up to him already dressed for work and making breakfast. I didn't speak to him and went into our bedroom. Again, he didn't try to stop me or even say a single word to me. I didn't know what to do. I waited for him to come in after me, but after some time I heard the front door close and knew that he had left. I spent most of that day crying to my friends and my mom. I called in sick from work. I remember it like it was yesterday. By the time he was due to come back from work, I had a whole speech ready about how he broke my heart and needed to be a better husband to me. Little did I know, he also had a speech ready, and it was nothing I could have imagined. The first thing he said after coming home was, "We need to talk." That worked for me. I needed to talk as well. I thought I needed to talk way more than he did, really. Turns out he had the surprise of a lifetime for me. We sat down across from each other, and with no warning he asked me, "Whose baby is it?" I was so confused, I genuinely didn't understand what he meant, so I asked him, and he repeated the same question, "Whose baby is it?" I will never forget. I asked him what he meant and said that obviously it was our baby. What else could even be possible? He told me that we were past that point and I should just admit the truth and get it done with. I was starting to get scared at that point. It started to feel less like a joke. I told him again that it was obviously his baby, and I didn't understand why he was even asking me such questions because I had never been anything but loyal to him, and he had never acted this way before. He refused to make eye contact with me and said that was when I still cared about our relationship. I'm pretty sure I was already crying by then. I kept telling him that I loved him and there was nothing more important to me than our marriage, but he just kept repeating the question. He must have asked me a dozen times, and each time I was as clueless as the first time. He told me that if I couldn't be honest with him, there was very little left to do because he was not raising another man's child and living with a lie. I was sobbing and kept telling him I had never even thought of another man since I met him and didn't understand what I did to deserve such allegations. He said that with the way I couldn't wait for him to leave the house and go on business trips, it told him everything he needed to know about my loyalty. I was too confused to even speak. Every single time he left for work, I got sad and told myself to be an adult and support him in his career because I remembered how hard it was for both of us when he lost his job. Every single time, I stopped asking to go along with him after the first few times because he always said he was busy constantly and didn't get a minute to himself until late at night. I stopped calling him more than once a day when he was away because he wouldn't pick up and texted me he was with clients. All I did was put him first, only to hear him say that I wanted him away to spend time with another man. It felt like a slap in the face. I felt sick to my stomach, almost thought I was in a bad dream of some sort. I told him all of this, and he said that I shouldn't waste time making him look like the villain because he was tired of feeling unwanted and wouldn't let me make a fool of him. He said that ever since he started working and traveling, I had been distant and didn't make him feel wanted. He said he hated coming home because I didn't even look happy to see him, and he felt like I was happier when he was not around. I kept telling him he was wrong, and this was just a huge misunderstanding, and that I was just trying to be a supportive wife. He kept saying that I was hiding someone and preferred to spend time with someone else instead of being in our marriage. I asked him if he had any proof of these things he was saying, and he said that he didn't need proof to see what was obvious to anyone with half a brain cell. I didn't even know what to say to that. I kept saying I have not been with anyone, and that I spent most days he wasn't here either at home or maybe once or twice out with my friends, and that he could check my phone if he wanted to. His response to that was that he didn't need my phone with deleted evidence. I was truly defeated by that. I mean, what more could I even say? I asked him what he wanted me to do to prove my loyalty. I offered a paternity test after the baby was born, even though it killed my self-respect to say such a demeaning thing. Never in a million years could I have imagined voluntarily offering a paternity test. I have always been proud of my morals and ethics. Anyone who knows me would have backed me up in this. Anyone except my own husband, of course. That's what hurt the most. He said that he couldn't wait 9 months for a betrayal, and there was no way he would help me grow and raise a child that wasn't his. I screamed at him, saying it was his baby, and called him a delusional freak for not believing me. He said that he didn't care what I thought he was, but if I wanted this marriage to work, I needed to get an abortion. I was horrified he even said that. I asked him to think about what he was saying for a second and how crazy he sounded. He wouldn't budge, so I asked him what he would do if I didn't get an abortion because there was no way I would get one. He told me that if I wanted this marriage, then I had to get an abortion or else it was divorce. Divorce. I couldn't believe that he actually said the word. I asked him if he was serious, and he said he was. I had enough at that point. It was like all the sadness disappeared at hearing those words. I told him he was free to do whatever he wanted, but I was keeping and raising my baby with or without him. He told me that he hoped I didn't sleep with a deadbeat and walked out of the house. That was the last time we were in that house together. I received a text from him later saying he would be back to get his stuff, and I told him a time I would be out and asked him to be gone before I got back. The next day, I met my lawyer to discuss the divorce. We had bought the house together, our first house. I wanted everything to be quick and drama-free, and so did Alex. We decided to sell the house and split the money equally. As for the other things, we just took whatever we wanted. I moved in with my sister while I figured things out, and he went wherever. I guess we did not remain in touch at all. No one in our circles or our family saw it coming. The number of times I must have burst into tears trying to explain to someone what happened is ridiculous. Throughout everything, his attitude remained the same. He refused to hear me or anyone else out and insisted that I hadn't been faithful. I was friends with some of his co-workers' wives, and they told me that he had been going on about how I couldn't care less about being with him and never put any effort into the relationship. The whole divorce felt like something that was happening to someone else, or like a movie, or something that I was watching instead of something I was actually living through. Points I almost started believing that I must have done something wrong to make him feel the way he said. More than anything, I wanted to talk it out, but he completely shut me out. When my son was born, I texted him to let him know, but he didn't say anything back. Months later, one of the wives reached out to me and asked if I had heard about him. I told her that we hadn't been in contact. She said she was sorry too, but wanted me to hear from a friend. I asked her what happened, and she said that Mark had gotten back with Sarah. Apparently they were the hot topic in the office and were all over each other all the time. I broke down crying. Over the next few weeks, I found out everything they had been seeing each other for months. All those business trips that he went on were nothing but excuses to spend time with Sarah at her place. Sarah was the one who brainwashed him into thinking I must be seeing other men behind his back because, according to her, if she had a man, she would never let him stay away from her so often, and a load of other garbage. I found out about all this because my friends pretended to befriend her to know what happened between Mark and me. She was extremely smug about it and didn't seem to regret it at all. I felt like the stupidest person in the world, honestly. I saw all the signs and red flags that I had missed. In hindsight, it feels so incredibly obvious. I spent months in a slump. I was extremely depressed, and it was undoubtedly the hardest period of my life. I had to quit my job and had to rely on my family to get me by. Being a single mother and dealing with my depression and the guilt of being a burden on my family was excruciatingly rough, to say the least. I'm glad my sister was there for me. I don't know how I would have managed without her. It took some time, but I recovered. I stopped obsessing about Mark and Sarah, focused on my son, found another job, and got a place of my own. I thought I was done with my ex-husband forever. 2 years ago, I got married to an amazing man who treats me like a queen. He is the best thing that has possibly ever happened to me, and I am so glad my son and I get to have him in our lives. Now that I've gotten all that out of the way, let me tell you why I'm actually writing this post. A few days ago, I was on Facebook, scrolling randomly, when I got a text from Mark. We have had absolutely no contact over the last few years, so seeing his name pop up on the screen was a feeling I cannot exactly describe. I wondered if I should even open his text, but curiosity got the best of me, and I opened the chat. He said that he had been trying to contact me, but my number had changed, and he didn't know where I live now. He wrote a very long text about how he had broken up with Sarah because she was cheating on him with multiple men, and that he never should have let her come into our relationship. He said that he had thought of me and our son all the time over the past 8 years, but was too ashamed to reach out to me. He also said that he knew I would never forgive him, but he wanted to be in his son's life and would do anything for a chance to prove himself worthy of being a dad. The text had a lot of other things, but mostly just him groveling about how he wants to see his son. I couldn't believe my eyes, really. After all those years, the poetic justice of Sarah cheating on him after he accused me of doing that isn't lost on me. It also felt really good to see him grovel and beg about being a part of my son's life, because I know that no matter what he says, it isn't happening. I thought a lot about what I could do. I thought of ignoring him, lashing out at him, or simply blocking him, but then the revengeful side of my brain took over. My son didn't have a father listed on his birth certificate. I chose not to include Mark's name, and Mark didn't care at the time. Legally, he has no right over him. I dated my husband for 2 years before marrying him, and he has known and loved my son ever since. He is the only father figure in his life. A year ago, on our wedding anniversary, he officially adopted my son. We are a family in every sense of the word. So I let the evil thoughts win a little and texted Mark back, saying I didn't know what he was talking about. I told him my son was never his to begin with, and that my wonderful husband had adopted him. I said that whatever Sarah made him believe all those years ago was right, and that he was the type of person to be cheated on. I added that I was glad he was all alone now because he deserved that. I sent a picture of me, my husband, and our boy as the cherry on top. I told him to never contact me again and then blocked him. Of course, what I said about my son not being Mark's biological child isn't true, but that doesn't give him any right over my son. He lost that chance before my boy was even born, and I couldn't let go of the opportunity to make him feel even a tiny portion of the suffering he caused me. I told my husband about what I did, and he just laughed and said I didn't have to be so petty. Last night I reached out to Laura, whose husband works with Mark, and asked her if she had heard anything about him. She said she was actually going to reach out to me about the same thing. Apparently Mark hasn't been doing so well. He had shown up to work drunk multiple times and almost got fired. Laura didn't know what I told Mark, so she thought it was because he was finally processing the separation from Sarah. They broke up months ago. I just listened to everything and pretended to be shocked at what she said. I thanked her for being a good friend. I haven't told my husband about this yet, and I can't tell any of my friends before I tell him. I've been feeling kind of guilty. Maybe I took things too far. Update 1. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for all your supportive comments and advice. It's been really helpful to read through your experiences and perspectives. It feels good to know that there are people who support my pettiness and think that Mark got exactly what he deserved. I do have a bit of an update on the whole Mark situation. Laura reached out to me again and said that apparently he had a full-blown fight with Sarah in the office one night when they were both working late. He had created a big scene, and multiple people saw them pushing each other around and being extremely problematic. Both Sarah and Mark got fired very quickly after that, and no one has heard from either of them since. All I feel about the situation is relief that he redirected his anger towards Sarah and isn't trying to drag me into the situation in any way. I don't want to deal with him ever again in any capacity. I decided to tell Laura about what I told Mark, and she seemed a bit concerned. We both hate Mark for what he did to my son and me, but she thinks I might have taken things too far and that there's no point in letting things from the past affect him or anyone so much. She is actually telling me to reach out to Mark again and tell him the truth. She has promised not to tell a word about this to anyone, but thinks I should get the truth out in the open. I don't agree with this for a number of reasons, mostly because I don't care enough about Mark to put him out of his misery, but also because I feared that he might get angry and try to find some way to gain access to my son. It's unlikely, but you never know. I refuse to take any chances when it comes to my child. He is simply too important to me, and I don't trust Mark enough to just let this go. What I did might have been harsh, but I don't see why it should be such a big blow to him now. Update 2. Since my last update, I've done a lot of reflecting. I decided to have an honest conversation with my husband about everything that happened and what Laura told me. He was incredibly understanding and supportive, which made me feel a lot better. We sat down together and I explained the entire situation in detail, including the message Mark sent and my response to him. My husband listened patiently, holding my hand the whole time. When I finished, he told me that while he understood why I did what I did, he also agreed that it might have been a bit harsh. We talked about the importance of moving forward and not letting the past affect our present happiness. This conversation really helped me put things into perspective. I realized that while I might have been a bit harsh, I don't regret standing up for myself and my son. Mark made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. I do recognize, however, that I need to work on the resentment I feel towards him because my husband says it's not healthy. I kind of agree with him, but that's my business, and so is my family. I don't see why Mark has to be a part of it. Update 3. Hi again. I wanted to share a quick update about my situation. After talking with my husband, I decided to reach out to a therapist to help me work through some lingering feelings about Mark and the whole ordeal. It's been really helpful to get a professional perspective and to start letting go of the past. I'm doing this for my own marriage, not because I care about Mark. I feel that to be a better wife and a better mom to my kid, I need to let go of the past completely. Some of you had also suggested therapy, and I must admit, you guys were right. As far as Mark is concerned, I haven't heard from Laura anymore since the last time, and I am not interested enough to ask about him again. I don't care how he is a grown adult and should take care of his own issues. Personally, I am doing great, and that's all that matters to me. I'm glad he reached out to me and got what he deserved.